In Dungeons and Dragons, there are dungeons full of monsters and traps. Dungeons are the heart of the game. It's in the title. Dungeons is usually where the party gets challenged in difficulty and especially resource management. Dungeons and Dragons is mechanically a resource game. If you run out of resources, you're going to die if you proceed. Now, luckily for us, this game is easy majority of the time, so there's a lot of room for mistakes and resource use. But sometimes the dungeon is very deadly or incredibly long, which means we need to approach in other cautious ways that are safer than brute force. Welcome to Pack Tactics, where we approach dungeons with safety, not only for optimization's sake, but because we're also role-playing as experienced adventurers, or should I say successful adventurers. This is a D&D 5e and 2024 channel, but the way people dungeon crawl in different medieval fantasy systems is kinda similar to what we do here, except an old school Renaissance system, for example, might make light resources or specific resources more important than it is in our game. Generally, the best way to dungeon crawl is to follow the OSR dungeon crawl meta at a basic level.
Wait, old school RuneScape? I love that game!
No, old school Renaissance. They're more like classic Dungeons and Dragons than modern Dungeons and Dragons. They're usually way more lethal. And there's a lot more lull random mechanics, which I actually hate. That's why I normally don't play them. The only one I love is Worlds Without Number. Ooh, it's so good. Anyways, we should be thinking and approaching dungeons like they do for safety reasons and engaging gameplay. It makes perfect sense for you and your character to care about this. Dungeons are life-threatening. These old-school players, you'll see them use 10-foot poles to trigger things like levers behind porculus doors, ropes for climbing or tying people, bullseye lanterns that show vision forward like a real-life flashlight. They'll throw torches across rooms or down deep black pits. They use rocks they find on the floor and throw them at things like traps. You get the point. Old school players use many different tools to proceed through the dungeons. They have to, or else that poison dart trap will kill them. Now obviously some OSRs are nicer than others, but in majority of their games, there's less room for mistakes in their games compared to us. They care about equipment more than us. The first thing they usually buy is a party cart. And then from there, they buy every mundane tool they can think of so they can use it in the dungeon. That's smart. Good use of basic equipment for safety conserves our most important resource of all: hit points and hit dice. Just because you're super powerful doesn't mean you should be reckless and skip basic equipment. If you mess up too many times, you'll either waste a ton of time by needing to rest, which can be a very bad thing, or you'll just die, which is the worst case scenario. Now, don't get me wrong. If the party needs to long rest or short rest, I advise you do it. Especially if there's warlocks in the party. They need their little naps. But if you guys play very safely, rests, especially long rests, will rarely happen. And that also means there will be less chances of random encounters in the dungeon. The 60-foot dark vision meme is powerful, sure. It's easy vision, which almost everyone has. But having disadvantage in perception in a dungeon that has traps is just terrible. And in D&D 5e, that disadvantage to perception is even worse because of the surprise rules. Those monsters will tear you to shreds. I've seen plenty of parties die over this. Surprise back then was like action surge, but for all the enemies. And they had advantage. If they focus fired, somebody would get downed immediately. Luckily for us in 2024, surprise is not that deadly. But still though, disadvantage to initiative and them having advantage against you is not good. Disadvantage to perception can also make you potentially lose out on some loot and specific information that's important to the crawl, like lore or puzzles or whatever. Don't brute force everything. Buy a bullseye lantern. It's a medieval flashlight. Use it. If you need darkness, you just cover the light with a cloth. Most of the time, you need proper vision in dungeons if your DM cares about the dungeon details, which I hope they do. Dungeons are incredibly engaging. They're so fun and complicated when it's done right. It really sucks that there's no dungeon chapter in Dungeons and Dragons. It's a crime. It makes me mad. Anyways, equipment is actually not what I wanted to talk about here today, because I've already made a video about it. I just want you to be in the mindset of an OSR player, but with superhero powers, I suppose. Our characters are just so much stronger than them, especially with the spells and our resources. We have extreme options that are useful almost everywhere, and funnily enough, there's a lot of them, which can make this video long. But I just want to point out the best options that optimizers use, because that saves us a lot of time. It's usually 5-6 specific spells that solve 90% of our dungeon problems in specifically the utility part and the traps and all of that. They are our main safety tools for basic dungeon crawling. The rest are usually solved by mundane equipment and logic. But before we get into that, this video is sponsored by Kibble's Compendium of Airships and Artifacts. It's steampunk, and it's got 250 pages of awesome stuff that's compatible with 2014 and 2024 rules. It's got mechanics for building, fighting, and traveling in airships. There's also battle maps you can play around with. There's unique artifacts you can find, which are items you can customize. They also level up with you, kind of like a class, and there's a crafting system as well. But best of all, there's 2 new classes to play. Paragon, that's an active martial class which specializes in unleashing unique powers every turn. And there's Summoner, which summons minions but with a fun twist where you can customize your pet. It's also designed to run in a much more streamlined way compared to the classic Conjure animals. You start with 1 and eventually you get more every 5 levels or so. It's a half-caster. There's also over 30 subclasses for the core classes, and previously published classes from Kibbles. And there's dozens of feats, spells, and so much more. I highly recommend checking out Kibble's Compendium of Airships and Artifacts and backing it on Kickstarter. This guy is like the master at giving you a sea of options. So if you love building characters, oh boy, you're gonna love this book. Link in the description. Back to the video. Let's start with the most cursed one, Unseen Servant. This spell is a first level ritual spell that creates an invisible force which can perform simple tasks. You use a bonus action to command it. It can touch things, it can hold things, it can interact with things. Normally we give it a rock, it is strong enough to carry and make it walk over traps. Or we give it the 10-foot pole for it to poke around at things.
But Kobold, won't it die?
The cursed answer, which is Hyper Rules as written, is usually no. But if it does die, it doesn't really matter because it's a ritual spell. Usually these traps have a one-time trigger, and you're avoiding rolling dice against these traps. The only drawback here is you're spending 10 minutes to ritual cast the spell. I would rather wait 10 minutes than risk take damage.
Wait, what's cursed about it? I don't understand. How does it survive with 10 AC and 1 hit point?
This spell is not a creature or an object, it's a force. That makes targeting it really hard, rules as written. I thought the intent was the Unseen Servant is a creature, but they never changed it in the 2024 book. It's still a force to this day, which is really strange because it being a force is super well known. Anyways, next. Find Familiar. This is popular for scouting in dungeons. You're sending a little creature in and looking through their eyes like it's a drone. This spell deserves a big video, which I've never done for some reason. And now in 2024, there's new optimization that's pretty impactful. But for the most part, it's the same. People usually go for the owls for flyby and 60-foot speed. Or they use the bat for 60-foot blind sight. I am not a bat user. I like owls. But the thing that makes bats insanely good is they're usually better scouts than owls in dungeons. It's normal to see a random bat in a dungeon, so most enemies won't even bat an eye thinking it's a familiar. They'll just think it's a normal animal. They might still capture it and eat it though, but you have less chances of it dying. That makes it easier to scout the entire layout of the dungeon. And then your party plans their dungeon crawl from there. You draw a map on some paper and all the characters will figure it out from there. Warlocks especially are the masters at scouting because they have better familiar options. If you pick Pact of the Chain Invocation, you can turn your Find Familiar into an imp. Imps can become invisible and fly around. There's many ways to scout, but using a familiar is one of the most safest ways to figure out the entire layout of the dungeon. If it dies, who cares? Oh no, you lost some gold. This isn't like a party member getting caught alone in the dungeon. It's just a summon. Who cares? One last thing, and I learned this tech from Gator. Summoning a Find Familiar is not sight-based. So if there's like, let's say, a bank vault door, as an extreme example, you can summon the bat on the other side of that door. That also works if you put it in a pocket dimension and then summon it back. From there, you can see what's on the other side by looking through their vision. And if you want to break in with them, you can use Misty Step to get through. Normally, you can't do that because Misty Step is sight-based. But because you can see through the familiar's vision, you can teleport through the vaults. Thank you, Gator.
No problem. I've robbed many banks.
Next on our list is Locate Object. It is mainly used to detect magic items after you've cleared the entire dungeon. It's a sweeper. You can triangulate the location of hidden magic items. It's best used in modules. For a more detailed guide, check out the Tabletop Builds article. I have to make a video on this one day, but I worry no one's gonna watch it. But it's super useful for multiple things. By the way, when you're dungeon crawling, I recommend clearing all the rooms of enemies before looting anything. That saves you a bunch of time, and the traps themselves or mimics or whatever become less dangerous to you and the party. The resources you lose while looting won't affect you later in the dungeon crawl, because you've already cleared out the most dangerous things in there. If it's a mega dungeon, this strategy won't work, but for smaller and medium-sized ones, this is a really effective strategy. Last spell is Tiny Hut. It's a super broken spell. It did get nerfed, but it's still broken. Basically, you can ritual cast this in a dungeon, and that gives your party a safe place to long rest. Enemies can't affect anyone inside unless they have 3rd level spells and up. So that makes majority of random encounters not be a threat to you while you rest. This spell is also great for blocking 10-foot funnels and double doorways. It's a perfect barricade. I wouldn't be surprised if your DM bans this or nerfs it. I don't allow this spell to be cast in dungeons. That's it for the list. All of these spells I mentioned are the perfect tools for dungeon crawling. They're very cheap and extremely effective. As a special mention, there's also Dispel Magic for obvious reasons. But usually the Unseen Servant can just trigger dangerous magics for you while you stay far away unaffected. Dispel Magic is expensive too. There are more spells out there that are useful too, but they're either not as good as these, or they're too expensive to cast. If you want to see what a lot of these spells do, I recommend watching the Ultimate Divination video. Link in the description. One more thing, and this tip is like the most important out of everything here. It has to do with terrain. Funnels and doorways are really important in dungeons. They are your best friends. Good positioning wins battles safely, because if you block a doorway like this, then the enemies can't reach the backline where your friends are. And when enemies are bundled together up in front of a doorway or a funnel, it's easy for everyone to put down AoEs. Also, use the previous rooms you were in battle. They're really important. They usually have better funneling, for example. And the better the funneling is, the less damage your party takes, especially if they take advantage of spells like Web. Control is super powerful in these environments. A complete surround is the absolute worst thing that can happen to your party. Or anyone, for a matter of fact. I don't care if you're a barbarian. Just do not run into the open room. Stay in the funnels. You won't believe how many times I've seen barbarians die over this. Especially if flanking is a thing. Holy moly. Oh, and there's one more thing. I almost forgot about this one. End your turns behind cover. That way you can't be targeted. Anyways, that's it. Always think like an OSR player and crawl safely with your spells and tools and walls and funnels and doors. Conserve your hit points and hit dice. Don't be reckless. If you make too many mistakes, you will die. End of video. If you liked this video, I hope I earned your subscription and like. And maybe you can share me on Reddit. They love me. Also, if you wish to support me directly, I've got a Patreon and membership on YouTube. Anyways, thank you for watching. Bye bye.